Okay, basically, what we're doing is we are talking about scientific writing as in writing a thesis. So we will describe what each part, how each part functions in a thesis, and then we're going to also learn about what people, how people write those parts. As we are talking, as we are discussing in lectures, we will also try to look into the scientific writing that's available and try to look at their, how they do their introduction, how they do their method results. So for I'm going to just give 2 hours of lectures, and then in the third hour, you're supposed to look at a sample article or sample thesis and look at their introduction. And see what's your comment about the introduction based on the discussion that we've had in the class. So let's say Zianin, ZN will look at the thesis that you have taken from. Do you have a copy of the thesis?
Which thesis are we talking about?
The one that you were saying that you had gone to the library to get?
Not yet.
Not
I believe yet. I hadn't done anything about it yet.
Okay, so I can give you a sample not thesis, but a journal article. Okay.
Yeah.
Journal article. So so in the third hour, I'm going to give you sample articles, and you are to look at the introduction part of the paper and explain what the author is doing in the introduction and whether what he's doing is what we have talked about in the lectures. Jining, don't worry if you don't have any background knowledge because it's the third class. It's okay, but maybe it gives you a first impression of what an introduction should be in a journal article. Okay. So basically the last class, last week, we talked about what is scientific writing. Yeah. So today we're going to talk about what is empiricism. Yeah. So empiricism in philosophy is a theory that states that knowledge comes only or primarily from sensory experience. It is one of the several views of epistemology, along with rationalism and skepticism. Basically, empiricism emphasizes the role of empirical evidence in the formation of ideas rather than innate ideas or traditions. So when we talk about empirical evidence means we have the data, we have the data that we collected either in the lab or outside when we collect data. So there'll be data that you can use as evidence rather than innate ideas. Innate ideas means we are born with it. Innate ideas like language. Language is innate. You know, all human beings are born with the ability to learn, to acquire language when they are small, up to 5 years. Yeah? Done in a very simple, natural, without being taught, without memorizing. We somehow can acquire language. So that is innate. Innate means you're born with it. That means it is postulated that in your brain, we have a part of it which is specializing or functions for language, and it it has a template for languages, you know. So with that template, all the child needs to do is to be exposed to the language. So that is innate lah. All right. Tradition meaning like philosophy, for example, there is a tradition of reasoning. So we follow that. Okay. So empiricism is opposite of innate and opposite of tradition. However, empiricists may argue that traditions or customs arise due to the relations of previous sense experiences. Okay. So historically, empiricism was associated with the blank slate concept, which is tabula rasa, according to which the human mind is blank at birth and develops its thoughts through only through experience. So if I'm not sure if you are exposed to the theory of how children learn language, but if you are familiar with behaviorism, B.F. Skinner, this is the theoretical framework that was there before the generative tradition, or Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky came up with the generative tradition, and he postulated innate, that language is innate. But before that, from 1900 to 1957, for example, researchers were looking at language acquisition through the behaviorist point of view. Yeah. So the behaviorist is associated to psychology. So when it is connected to response, stimuli and response. So you have a stimuli, something that triggers some reaction, and then you have a response to that stimuli. So it is said that the formation of behavior is based on the sequences of stimuli response, that goes on and on until we form that behavior. So according to when we talk about language acquisition, the behaviorists assume that all children are born with a blank slate, tabula rasa, and the environment and people around us, they help to develop our thoughts through the experience. Okay, so that means in that framework, you can only form a behavior if you have a stimuli and you respond. And in learning language, they always say it's learned by imitation. Yeah? That we learn language as a child when we hear adults speak and we imitate adults. So that's tabula rasa. But of course, in 1957, Noam Chomsky came out with a book which basically refute this theory, and say that cannot be that, because language is creative and sometimes we will say things that we have never heard before. And therefore, the birth of another theory was born, which is generative transformation generative. Okay, so empiricism in the philosophy of science emphasizes evidence, especially as discovered in experiments. It is a fundamental part of the scientific method that all hypotheses and theories must be tested against observation of the natural world, rather than testing solely on a priori reasoning, intuition, or revelation. So empiricism in science means that you collect data by doing an experiment. And then before you do the experiment, you have theories that you utilize. And with those theories come hypotheses. And then you test the hypotheses based on the data in the experiment. Okay. Empiricism, often used by natural scientists, says that knowledge is based on experience and that knowledge tentative, and probabilistic, subject to continued revision and falsification. So empiricism treats knowledge as tentative, to be proven, to be tested and refuted. But if it's non-refutable, that means that is the fact of the research. Yeah? And it has to undergo scientific method, specific scientific method. So that's empiricism. Not to be confused with evidence-based research. So empirical research is research using empirical evidence, yeah, obtained through direct and indirect observation or experience. It values some research more than other kinds. It can be analyzed quantitatively or qualitatively. So quantitatively means that you answer some empirical question, and by looking at the evidence collected, and the research design varies through the discipline, and by the questions, the research questions that you have constructed. Some researchers actually combine qualitative and quantitative forms of analysis. You can actually do purely quantitative, but you have to be very detailed in the statistics. The statistics have to be quite sophisticated. Maybe coming out with a theoretic with a modeling using the SAM, for example. It can also be qualitative, purely qualitative. Also meaning that it's very in depth. Qualitative means you have a lot of data through either spoken data or text data, and you analyze the text or the spoken data qualitatively by extracting the themes, yeah, from the data. Okay. Right. In some fields, quantitative research may begin with a research question. For example, does listening to vocal music during the learning of a word list have an effect on later memory for these words? So the task is to learn a list of words, and at the same time, listening to vocal music. Vocal music, I would think like a cappella. Acapella means it's performed live, live without. So maybe I think it's you're listening to someone singing, and then you're also learning a word list. So does that, by doing two things simultaneously at the same time, will that have an effect on later memory of these words? Are you able to can you actually recall the words? How well can you recall the words? And this is tested through experimentation. Usually the researcher will have a certain theory regarding the topic under investigation. So maybe memory, executive memory, like doing two things at one time. You're actually using like music and words. You're using two parts of the brain. So based on this theory, statement or hypothesis will be proposed. For example, the hypothesis like listening to vocal music has a negative effect on learning a word list. Okay, so this is a hypothesis. From this hypothesis, predictions about specific events are derived. For example, people who study a word list while listening to vocal music will remember fewer words on a later memory test compared to people who study a word list in silence. Yeah. So you have the experimental group whereby the subjects listen to doing two things at one time, vocal music and learning a word list, versus a control group. A control group which only studies the word list in silence, no music. So you can see the difference in the environment. Eh? So these predictions can then be tested with a suitable experiment. Depending on the outcomes of the experiment, the theory in which the hypotheses and predictions were based will be supported or not, or they may be modified. They need to be modified, and then after that, subject to further testing. Okay, so this is empirical research. Any question? Okay.
No, not at the moment.
Okay, so scientific method is an empirical method that originates from natural sciences. And empirical research in non-science fields also is based on scientific method, although with some adaptations, but nevertheless still using empirical. Okay, social science and behavior sciences. So what is behavioral sciences? It explores the cognitive processes within organisms, human beings, yeah, animals, and the behavioral interaction between organisms in the natural world and how we interrelate with one another. It involves the systematic analysis and investigation of human and animal behavior through naturalistic observation, controlled scientific experimentation, and mathematical modeling. It attempts to accomplish legitimate objective conclusions through rigorous formulation and observations. So for example of behavioral sciences include psychology, psychobiology, anthropology, cognitive science, anything actually, education, linguistics, um, what else? Social science. Generally, behavior science deals primarily with human action and often seeks to generalize about human behavior as it relates to society. So what we're doing is mostly we are doing behavior science. Okay, so previously we talked about science. So what is science? So science refers to a systematic and organized body of knowledge in any area of inquiry that is acquired using the scientific method. And we group science into two broad categories, natural science and social science. So natural science is the science of naturally occurring objects or phenomena. You're studying light, objects, matter, earth, celestial body in the galaxy, or the human body itself. Natural science can be further classified into physical science, earth science, life science, and others. Okay, what about social science in contrast? Social science is a science of people or collections of people, such as groups, firms, societies, or economies, and their individual or collective behaviors. Yeah, and social science can be classified into psychology, which is the science of human behaviors, sociology, the science of social groups, and economics, the science of firms, markets, and economies. So I think education would come into sociology, but of course there's further differentiation or classification under sociology. What is the difference between humanities and social science? So in general, humanities and social science deal with human aspects like politics, law, linguistics, economics, and psychology. One of the major differences between them is that humanities involve a more critical and analytical approach, whereas social science deals with more of a scientific approach. Humanities are a branch of science that deals with the heritage and the question of what makes us human. So humanities deal with law, history, ancient languages, modern languages, philosophy, history, religion, visual or performing arts. It can be considered more philosophical than social science. But I think when we talk about languages, for example, linguistics can go in, is in humanities, but it is more like scientific approach. So linguistics is the scientific study of languages. The languages mentioned here is probably more of studying the grammar, the use of the language. But in linguistics, we're doing more than that. So sometimes there's overlapping. Yeah? Okay, as there is a scientific approach to social science, it is considered to be a branch of study in between humanities and natural sciences. So, okay, so the overlapping is here. Linguistics, psychology, economics, education come under the purview of social sciences. And then how social science differs from natural sciences. So the natural sciences are different in several respects. Natural science are very precise, accurate, deterministic, and independent of the person making the scientific observation. However, the same cannot be said for the social science, which tend to be less accurate, deterministic, or unambiguous. So, for example, if you measure a person's happiness using a hypothetical instrument, you may find that the same person is more happy or less happy or sad on different days and sometimes at different times of the day. One's happiness may vary according to the news the person received that day or the events that happened earlier during the day. There is not a single instrument or metric that can accurately measure a person's happiness. Hence, one instrument may calibrate a person as being more happy, while a second instrument may find that the same person is less happy at the same time. So in other words, there is a high degree of measurement error in the social science, and there is considerable uncertainty and little agreement on social science policy decision. So it's not as precise as science. And there might be, for instance, you will not find many disagreement among natural scientists on the speed of light or the speed of the Earth around the sun, because it's very objective. You're measuring something, you're using something to measure precisely. Therefore, unless there is some error in the measurement or the error in the use of the instrument proven by a person after the discovery, then there'll be some disagreement, contention. But usually they're quite objective, quite precise. But in social science, you'll find numerous disagreement among social scientists on how to solve a social problem, such as reduce global terrorism or reduce global warming, or how to rescue an economy from a recession. Any student studying the social science must be cognizant of and comfortable with handling higher level of ambiguity, uncertainty, and error that come with such science. Which actually reflects the variability of social objects. So there is this always points of contention, points of disagreement about the findings. And because it's subjective, it is subjective to a certain extent. People can come with, let's say, how do you reduce global warming? So a lot of people from different backgrounds will have different solution to the problem. Okay. So this is talking about Lord Kelvin on measurement. I often say that when you measure what you are speaking about and express it in numbers, you know something about it. But when you cannot measure it, when you cannot express it in numbers, your knowledge is of meager and unsatisfactory kind. That means very limited. It may be the beginning of knowledge, but you have scarcely in your thoughts advanced to the state of science, whatever the matter may be. So I think is this is stressing in in 1883, stressing that the science of it, the science of measuring something using a valid, reliable tool, for example. Because if you can, he says, you can express it in numbers, you know something about it. But when you cannot express it in numbers because you don't know how to measure it, then your knowledge is quite limited. So that's how profound measuring is in science. So, so in social science, theory building and theory testing are particularly difficult, given the imprecise nature of the theoretical concepts, the inadequate tools to measure, and the presence of many unaccounted factors that can also influence the phenomenon of interest. It's also very difficult to refute theories that do not work. Unlike theories in natural sciences, social sciences theories are rarely perfect, which provides numerous opportunities for researchers to improve those theories or build their own alternative theories. Let's see if I'm talking about looking at the performance of hearing impaired kids, kids with hearing impairment. Kids with hearing impairments are kids who cannot hear or do not hear sounds. They can be amplified. That means you can use either a hearing aid to amplify their hearing, or when they are quite severe, you have to operate and replace their cochlea in the ear with the bionic cochlea, right? So when they either you use a hearing aid or you have a bionic ear or cochlea in your ear, you need to be trained again how to listen, right? So then people say, okay, why is it that children with hearing impairment perform poorly in the school subjects compared to typically developing peers? So let's say you take a child, a 9-year-old child who is hearing impaired versus a 9-year-old child who has normal hearing. And you can see the difference in their performance, in their speech. And then we want to, let's say our aim is to find out what are the factors which might contribute to this low performance. So you'll find that there are many factors actually. Depends on when they had that operation or when they started their wearing the hearing aid. When was the switch on? So hearing aid, you need to put it on and train the child or the individual to use it. The cochlear implant, you need to switch on the cochlea, and then the audiologist will have to play around. And then it depends on how often they go to therapy, speech therapy sessions, how committed are their parents, how committed are their teachers, what is the level of knowledge and awareness of hearing impairment among their peers. So there's many factors. So these are the factors, and we as social scientists, we're supposed to find which factors are the most significant. And then we do some statistical testing and we find which is significant and which is not. Yeah? So that's how social sciences work. Abstraction in social science. So conducting good research requires first retraining your brain to think like a researcher. This requires visualizing the abstract from the actual observation, mentally connecting the dots to identify hidden concepts and patterns, and synthesizing those patterns into generalizable laws and theories that apply to other contexts beyond the domain of the initial observation. Meaning that what you are actually studying the behavior of people, right? You're studying behavior, you're in behavior science, and you study people and their relationship with other people. and with themselves when they are learning, let's say. But you need to step away from the data and try to think about what's the underlying theory, what's happening underlyingly, you know. So you have to visualize the abstract from the actual observation. Mentally thinking about connecting the dots means what is the relationship? How does it work? Yeah. So research involves constantly moving back and forth from an empirical plane where observations are conducted to a theoretical plane where these observations are abstracted into generalizable laws and theories. That means research means you come and look at the data. Yeah? So when you look at the data, empirical. When you look at the data, you are using some empirical method to make sense of the data, to collect the data, to code the data, to analyze the data. And then based on this, you're supposed to deduce it to a theoretical plane. How, based on your initial theory that you have found, how does your data, or how is the theory able to explain your data? Is the theory able to explain your data? So you're moving back and forth. Back and forth means you get your data and you hypothesize, then you come up with the initial hypothesis, and then you look at further data. So when you look at further data, you're going to modify your hypothesis because there might be something that's in the data that wasn't in before, and you have to modify your hypothesis. Okay. This is a skill that takes many years to develop, and I think during your postgrad, PhD or masters, will help you to develop this skill. Yeah. Of course, working in a research institute or a research lab might help you. Yeah. So it says here, it's not something that is taught in graduate or doctoral programs or acquired industry training, and is by far the biggest deficit amongst PhD students. Well, it depends. I think by the end of it, you would know the theory of the area that you're doing it on. Huh? Some of the mental abstractions needed to think like researcher include units of analysis, constructs, hypotheses, operationalization. Operationalization means your conceptual framework, your conceptual framework for your own study. You're operationalizing it. Okay. What do you mean? Conceptual framework means you have your theory of the whole phenomena, and then you bring it down to your own environment, your data, and you come up with variables that you're going to manipulate. What is your fixed variable and your independent variable and your dependent variable. So you operationalize it. Theories, models, induction, deduction, and so forth. So units of analysis, it depends. One of the first decision in any social science is the unit of analysis of a scientific study. The unit of analysis refers to the person, collective, or the person, that means an individual or collective of individual, or object that is the target of the investigation. So it typically involves individuals, groups, organization, countries, technologies, objects and such. So for example, if you are interested in studying people's shopping behavior, their learning outcomes, or their attitudes to new technologies, then the unit analysis is the individual. You want to see how each individual respond to a certain phenomena. So one of the ways is to do a survey. You do a survey and you survey each and every one of the people in your population, and you ask them questions to get at what they do, what they think, how they feel. Yeah? Okay, if we want to study characteristics of street gangs or teamwork in organization, then the unit of analysis is the group. So you want to look at how they act as a group. If the goal of research is to understand how firms can improve profitability or make good executive decision, then the unit of analysis is the firm, the company. In this case, even though decisions are made by individuals in these firms, these individuals are presumed to represent their firm's decision rather than their personal decision. So it means, let's say you do a study on managers or financial officers and how they make decisions for their company based on financial consideration or human resource, for example. So you are actually asking questions to the person as their position, as not the person as their own person. Okay. If research is directed at understanding differences in national cultures, then the unit of analysis becomes a country. Yeah. Okay, so if you want to understand, for example, you do a study on why does Great Britain carry out such a elaborate burial ceremony for the Queen Elizabeth, for example, the whole country. So you're looking at the whole country, then the whole country becomes your unit of analysis. Even inanimate objects can serve as units of analysis. So if you're interested on how to make web pages more attractive to its users, then the unit of analysis is a web page. Yeah, so you sort of like have to look at websites, how it's presented and what's the function and other things. If we wish to study how knowledge transfer occurs between two firms, then our unit analysis becomes the dyad, the combination of firms. Okay, let's say if you're talking about interaction between parent and child, let's say small children, parent-child interaction in play, for example. So when the kids are playing with the parents, how is the dyad, we call it DYAD, dyad, that's the unit of analysis. So behavioral research methods are well studied. Okay, quantitative, qualitative, hybrid, which is like we call it mixed method approach. And social science also have similar principles and methods. Let me, or maybe later. So empirical studies in social science, behavioral sciences, you can watch this later, qualitative versus quanti. It's a 5 minutes video. Then this is another example, the impact of imitation on Chinese social commerce bias, purchase behavior, the moderating role of uncertainty. And this is a paper that you can actually okay. Comparing research methods in natural sciences with social behavioral sciences. So maybe we can discuss this, like what do you think would be the difference in terms of types of data acquisition or collection and analysis? Maybe you want to take a 5 minutes to think about this, and then you come back and discuss together.
Sure, I guess 5 minutes should be enough.
5 minutes, yeah. Just have a think about it. Okay, can we start?
Yep. Should be fine. I'm ready.
So who want to go first?
I don't see Jimmy. Do you want me to go first?
Let's see, participant, people. Yeah, he's gone. He's not here. Okay. Yeah, sure.
All right, sure. Let's go with types of data between natural sciences and social behavioral sciences. Natural sciences is more on natural phenomena or natural occurrences. Like for example, we are going to be researching about the factors causing flood in 2021 and between 2020, 2021, and 2022 in Malaysia. Let's say, for example, the data is much more precise, accurate. It's more quantitative, I believe. I mean, it can be quali as well, but more quantitative-ish, I believe.
Oh, what are we studying? The flood?
Flood occurrences or factors of flood occurrences in Malaysia between 2020 to 2020, 2021, 2022. Let's say, for example.
Okay.
And then where social behavior would be not so precise data because we are researching on certain behavioral changes. For example, very sorry, my washing machine is going on in the background. It may be a bit noisy.
Didn't hear it. I'm not hearing it. Yeah, no worries.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, as I was saying, there are certain behavioral changes. For example, the effects on the victims of the flood, because let's say, for example, the area of flooding is different every year, or the flood water level could vary. So what are the effects? What are the emotions of the victims, and so forth and so forth. So that would be more social behavioral sciences compared to versus natural sciences, which we focus more on natural phenomena.
So what would be the natural science of the topic of floods in Malaysia within the 3 years? What would be the natural science aspect of it?
We're
How
talking
would you
about
conduct a study?
maybe climate change, rising of seawater level, or greenhouse effect, earthquake, maybe, I don't know. Whereas social behavioral sciences could be victims, the community service, the governmental aid towards the flood victims. So more geared towards living organisms, people,
So
animals.
the natural science of the scope of study would be to look at the factors which causes or contribute to the rising water.
Yes.
Mhm.
So far, is that okay? The
Yeah,
types of data is
okay.
clear.
Mhm.
Okay. Then next will be data acquisition. One would be observing the phenomena, could be primary data, could be secondary data. Whereas social or behavioral sciences, it's more observation of the organism's behavior. So usually it would be more primary data and it's much more large scale. Or you do very qualitative, then it'll be very limited number of participants or people that you're studying.
When we look at natural science and we say they can be primary data and secondary data, what can you elaborate on that? What
Okay.
how would it?
So maybe the researcher could go to the area and to check out to do the research on what happened to the area, how high the water level rise, how long it took, maybe an interview with some of the victims or the community that helped the victims on how high the water rise, how long it took for the water to recede, uh, what are the aftermath, the effects of it, of the flood. Whereas social or behavioral science, it's more of observation, interview, survey on the people. So can be direct interview, primary data, direct survey with the victims, go and visit them, and you get data on how they feel and blah 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 blah. Or it can be secondary data where you get all of your informations online or from the news. Secondary data. What did the government do? What are the governmental aid towards the area affected, to the victims affected, and such?
I kind of think that the natural science, the data is more primary, and you collect the data by scientific collection of data, meaning you take a sample, a water sample, or you measure using some instrumentation, like really measuring the phenomena, of rainwater, of water levels, or soil, for example,
Soil erosion, yes.
yeah, soil erosion and all that. So I don't know. I think that the natural sciences will be more primary data. Yeah. I guess it becomes secondary when you're reading a report by someone. So in that sense, but if you're collecting the data directly, then it's primary.
Yeah.
Okay.
Should be, because maybe you are studying about, let's say, the state of Penang, and you are staying in Sabah Sarawak. You can be taking or flying over just to study and get primary data. Could be getting a research assistant. Is that still considered primary data?
Getting a
Research assistant.
well, I think whoever collects the data is not very important. Is what are you analyzing? Are you analyzing direct data, or you analyzing data from some other third party, for example? So in the direct primary data, it can be the researcher or assistant to the researcher. It doesn't matter, but it's not really who collects the data, but how you collect the data. Okay.
If
And
my
what?
research is a longitudinal research over the years, is it still considered primary data if I do that?
Yeah,
Still can.
yeah, because you are collecting the data yourself. I mean, you are collecting data
Yep.
directly from the source. It's actually the source. You're
Oh.
collecting from the source directly. So you're looking at samples of water that you took from the flood, and you're looking at I don't know, the microbes in the water. So you're really looking at the source, you know.
Sure.
But secondary, because you are not, because when you do a retrospective study or even survey studies, like right now the trend is systematic literature review, you know, or
Yep.
scoping review.
Yep.
Those kind of reviews, they are taking secondary data from the research, from the individual research, and then forming an analysis and giving a summary description of the areas of emphasis. So that's secondary. Okay. What about the unit of analysis?
Oh, I didn't do that.
Hmm.
Okay, I can. Oh, analysis is unit of analysis, is it?
Okay. Well, it can be analysis in general, but it can also be a units of analysis. So analysis means what kind of analysis are you going to do? Or what kind of analysis is conducted in natural versus social science?
Okay, analysis definitely. For social or behavioral sciences, it'll be on the either on the flood victims or on the community that provide assistance or the government itself. The government providing governmental aid, then we are looking at financial aid or resources, like whatever that is, medical help. Then we're looking at different aspects of it through the years. So how much they provide kind of help, and based on different states, how quick the assistance was or the aid was, how effective it is, blah 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 blah. But still, unit is on people. But I'm not so clear about natural sciences because I didn't do unit of analysis for natural science, and I'm not so familiar with it.
What do you think the kind of analysis that they will do?
Natural phenomena.
Mm.
So since we are talking about flood, we analyze uh, rainwater, flooding,
So
tsunami,
water samples.
water sample. Okay, got it.
So when you take water samples, you're actually looking at what's inside the water. So
Okay.
some microorganism, for example. So it'd be a lab study, right?
Oh, sure. I forgot about lab study. I was a former linguistics student, forgot about lab study. We don't do lab study.
So you
Yeah,
were
sure.
not a science student at Form 5, were you?
Yes, science student from science stream in Form 4, Form 5, then social sciences for degree.
Okay. So when you were
Completely
doing
forgot.
science, you would have done
Yeah.
experiments.
Collected data. Yes.
Yeah. So those kind of analysis will be done, yeah, by mixing
Oh
mixtures or
yeah.
something. Yeah.
I totally forgot from 4, from 5. Those are more natural sciences
Yeah,
research.
natural sciences research. Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay. Forgot. Thank you.
But at least you're science. I was never a science student.
Oh,
I think my lower secondary results were better for the arts. So although I wanted to go into science, because I always thought during my time, science is very glamorous, prestigious compared to arts, But I was advised on the contrary, so that's why I'm doing linguistics. So,
yep.
yeah, okay. So, right. So, I think in 5 minutes time, we'll do our prayers. So if we can
Yes,
take a 20 minutes break, that
definitely.
means this is 7:14.
We can come
7:30.
back after your prayer time,
Yeah,
which is 35, 40, entirely up to
it's
you.
on 20 minutes, 15 minutes for my prayers, and then now it's 5 minutes, so 20 minutes.
Do you want
So
to take a
now,
quick bite?
sure,
Okay.
7. Okay, so 30 minutes.
Sure.
All right. So 7:45. Let's say.
45?
Yeah.
Yes, sure.
All right. See you.
See you. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.